Alright guys, let's have a look at a competitive game that I played today. This is probably my only competitive game of the day. I'm playing somebody else rated in the 1400 to 1500 range, and I have the white pieces. This is a 30-minute rapid rated game. So I start with e4 and we have the unusual a6, the St. George defense. Obviously it seems quiet and slow, and it's really inviting white to grab the center. Okay, black now starts to compete for the center with d5, and I decide to capture d5. The idea here is that it's going to very likely to bring the queen out of hiding, and then if the queen comes out, my pawn's defended by my queen, I can develop my knight to c3 and kick the queen, so black's going to lose a tempo by having to move the queen a second time. So the queen does take, I play knight c3. This is something you very often see in the Scandinavian as well, and the queen retreats all the way to d8. So you could now argue that, well, there's no even argument, black is behind in development. It's white's turn to play. White has a pawn out in the center with some central control and has a knight developed with some control of some squares, some light colored squares as well. So black's definitely behind already at this point. So I now bring out my bishop to c4. Very often a good attacking bishop because it will naturally come out and look at the soft spot on f7, and it's also clearing one of the spaces for my king to castle. Black now plays this surprise h6. So go figure. Okay, we have knight to f3, so now just getting more control over these central squares. My knights are now looking pretty dominant here. I've got some nice control of squares within my opponent's half of the board, which is looking very good right now. Knight to f6 and white castles. So I'm just emphasizing my lead in development at this point. And we have b5, bishop just drops back to b3. So now it's very unlikely that the black's king's going to go that way. We can expect him to try and head for g8 and castle short. e6 is played. This is a prophylactic move, so it's getting in the way of this bishop. We'll see what becomes of that bishop. So now, playing rook to e1. I haven't finished developing my minor pieces yet, but I'd like to pin this pawn. I might have ideas of pushing d5 and actually attacking while black's king is still in the center of the board. And the reason it's still in the center of the board on move 9 is because he's spent two moves with a6 and h6 that don't help his bishops to develop. So he's behind. Now he's getting ready to castle, and now I push d6. Okay, now he goes ahead and castles anyway. I capture on e6, and we have an exchange of queens. All right, so now bishop takes e6. Now at this point, we're both castled. We've both got three minor pieces out in the board. So you might argue here that actually after that exchange here, with this pawn move, maybe this didn't really benefit white, right? Because I've got a lead here. I'm castled, and I've got three pieces out in the board, so that's worth 5, right? Whereas black only has, so castling's worth 2, plus 3 pieces developed. Okay, black is only on 2. Okay, but with this pawn move, now he's on 4, and now my queen. There's no extra development there. Did I have 4 develop? Oh, no. Okay, so now we are pretty equal. So maybe there was some inaccuracy there, but we'll have a look at the analysis on that. Bishop comes out to f4, attacking that pawn. Pawn now moves. Okay, I think the difference here, though, is that if you look at black's pawn structure, so material is equal. Black has a nice set of 3 on the queen side, but then has an isolated e-pawn and slightly staggered, so maybe weak, this pair on g and h. White, however, has completely solid 2 sets of 3, but my pawns are further back. Now, can black now press home his advantage and try and use these more advanced pawns, maybe, and try and gain some lead in the game based on that imbalance. I think that's the key here. I also have a centralized rook, so maybe slightly half a point ahead in development on that count. Develops his final knight, and I grab a free pawn. Okay, now this free pawn actually turns out to be quite decisive, I think, in the game. We have rook to e8, rook to e1, rook a to e1. So now clearly I'm threatening to capture the bishop. And how can black defend the bishop? I mean, he can't put his knight here as an extra defender because I just grab it, right? He can't move his knight there because the king's in the way. This knight can't defend it and that rook can't defend it. So he's going to have to move the bishop away. Okay, so now we've got a situation where, yeah, we could trade off some rooks. Do I want to do that? No, I decide I would rather keep... This is a very, very common situation, right? When you've got a contest, a face-off over an open file. There's actually two open files on the board. The D file is also completely open. But let's see, if I take his rook, he takes my rook, nothing's really resolved. I could take his rook and then he could take this knight, maybe, kind of undeveloping his knight. That was one idea. I just decided to keep the rooks on the board because I figure if he initiates, because I've got my rooks both lined up on that same file, right? If he initiates and I recapture, I have a rook on the E file and he doesn't, right? If we do it the other way around, I take, he recaptures, we both have a rook on the E file. And then we're in a kind of an impasse. Okay, but now he does capture and I recapture. So now I'm kind of controlling the E file with this rook. I'm also looking at this pawn that's defended only by that rook. So I'm feeling okay at this point. He advances c4, I attack his knight. My knight is protected by my own rook here. He doesn't like that, so he forks my knight and rook. So I grab his knight and he recaptures with his bishop. Okay, so situation now is I'm a pawn up and I've got maybe more solid pawns, but we shall see. Okay, now I offer to exchange bishops and he agrees, lifts his rook, so now his rook is defending both a6 and g7, which is decent. So his pawns are actually protected right now. Mine, on the other hand, knight's defending this one, but these two here are undefended right now, as is this one. So he brings his knight in, hitting my rook. I'm not having that. I say, all right, you can move your knight. He hits my rook again, I hit his knight again. He moves his knight now to b3. Now, looking at, yeah, so I decide to push b3, and here he almost loses his knight in a trap, right? So he takes, c takes b3, c takes b3, and now his knight can't go there or there because of my rook. Can't go there because of my rook. So he really only has one square to run away to, so he has to go to b2. And now I engage my king. So the idea here is to bring the king across, because the king can guard those two squares, the pawn's guarding those two squares, so I could potentially win the knight. Now he plays rook e7 check, I advance towards the knight. Now he played, this is a very good move, okay? So if I advance towards his knight, he's going to grab my knight. Okay, so if I do that, he's going to capture my knight. Okay, let's say I capture then his knight with my king. He might then drop down to d2, and that looks like a fork on king and pawn, right? So I didn't like that idea too much. On the other hand, my rook is now looking at this pawn that's undefended on a6 now. But then I realised I actually do have a defence. So I go ahead with this plan. He takes my knight, I take his knight. He does drop down to d2, but I have this X-ray defence. I can interpose my rook, break the check, and also defend this pawn through the attacker. It's an important move to remember. Rooks and queens and potentially bishops can do this as well. Okay, so he drops back now to defend a6. So now it's a very simple situation, right? We have 2 against 2 on the queen side, we have 2 against 3 on the king side. So all we need to do now is, well, I need to try and impress my one pawn superiority on black, and I should win the game. So I advance my king. I'm coming up for this guy now on a6. Okay, he engages his king, I push a pawn, king comes forwards, I move forwards now, potentially attacking this rook. Okay, he can't skewer my king because I can just take. But if he plays king d7, which he does, I know that I have to get my king the hell out of there because he has this rook. I have to move my king and then he will grab my rook and win the game. Okay, so now he moves his rook across and now he's attacking this guy. But my rook is doing a fairly decent job now of defending my pawns. So I slide my king up to a5, stops this pawn from advancing. And now it pretty much ties his rook down to the defense of that pawn. Okay, so it's got to stay on that 6th rank. King slides across, I throw in a check, jump back down, king moves back, I play 4, takes. Still similar situation. Now it's a 1 against 1 on the queen side, still 2 against 3 on the king side. King moves across, rook moves across, king moves across. Now I threaten his rook and he realizes that this is now the end of the game. Okay, very, very simple. If he takes my pawn, I'll take his pawn. And I'm also threatening this one, okay? So let's say rook takes pawn, okay? I've got even rook takes pawn now, and I'm defending this guy. This guy's defending this guy, right? And this rook can quite happily move up and down here and avoid the king, okay? Meanwhile, my king's going to grab that pawn, move aside, and the a-pawn's going to progress all the way to win. So we have a simple resignation there. So let's have a quick look at the game report and see if and where I messed up in that game. You should always do this. This is where you learn. This is where you get better. Too long I failed to analyse enough of my own games to realise, because I mean, this will just show you where your blind spots are. And that's how you get better at chess. You know, what should I have noticed? So I'm not looking for inaccuracies, I'm looking for obvious mistakes, obvious things that I should have seen. Okay, so on the whole, I've played well, but 6 mistakes. You can see a number of times I gained an advantage, lost it, gained an advantage, lost it, right? Several of these times when the graph drops down. Okay, so let's quickly run through this. A6 is a book move, but clearly not a very good one. Now I have already an advantage. E takes is best. Good, I'm pleased about that. Queen takes. Okay. So it's saying actually bringing my other knight out, rather than kicking the queen straight away, bringing my other knight out defending this pawn was even better. It kind of makes sense. You know, in general, you want to be moving your kingside minor pieces first. Queen d8 is best. Okay, but white now has an advantage. Again, it wants me to bring out my knight. Another sloppy move. Now I bring out my knight, and it likes white at this point in time. Knight comes out, castles is best, good. Bishop drops back is best. Very happy at this point. Okay, so he advances his pawn, and rook e1 is a mistake. It says I should have jumped in with my knight. And there's no immediate tactic there, because it's not like the bishop's looking at the f7 pawn. But it is a good square for the knight in general. I get that. Okay, so it doesn't like that rook move. It actually says that black is better at this point because of bishop b7. Bishop b7 is that. Looking at my knight. Maybe. Bishop e7 is a mistake, so now I have the upper hand again because of d5. It wants me to play d5. I play d5. That's best. Good. Castles. Takes is best. I'm now up at 2 again. It hates that. Queen, swapping the queens, big mistake. E takes f7. Ah, yeah. I've missed it. Okay, here's a tactic. The in-between move. I had a pawn. Could have captured the pawn with check. Then rook or king has to recapture, and then I take the queen. Okay, I just left a pawn on the table there. I just immediately, instinctively recaptured the queen. Mistake. It actually cost me 3 pawns worth of advantage, that. See? This guy's out on his own. He's not going to live much longer. In fact, he doesn't, because the bishop grabs it, right? So I've just lost a whole pawn, and it was a key pawn because it was one of the king's bodyguards. Oh, in fact, wow. Even worse. The pawn was defended by my bishop. What a dumbass. Look, could have just grabbed that with check, and if he'd captured with the rook, I'd have taken the rook. So what's he going to do? Move the king. You know? Really, really rushed that one. Really rushed that one. Okay. So there you go, you learn, right? It's so simple. The computer will teach you how to be a better chess player. Okay, rook e1 was best. Okay, it wanted me to come back and attack this pawn. Mistake. Now I play rook e1. That was good, but b4 was best. Okay, he says I should have counterattacked here and hit the knight, seeing as his pawn's under attack. Okay, that was best. That was best. That was best. Good. Bishop back is okay. King f7 would have been better. All right, king f1 is best. Liking these number of best moves. Good. Okay. Knight e4 is a mistake. Should have played bishop e3. Bishop e3. Why? Don't know. Bishop e3 is best because of that, then b4. No, can't really see it. Okay, that's another mistake. Knight takes c5 is good. Right, wanted me to take this knight and split up these pawns. Completely get that. That makes more sense. Should have captured that one with check, and then I can move my rook. Okay, so again, I think here it was just a lack of considering enough options. I probably didn't even look at that as an option. You know, I just thought, oh, my rook's under threat. I've got to do something about that knight. Right, let's just get it off the board. You know, it's very easy to do when you feel like you've got the upper hand in a game. So another good learning point there, considering all your candidate moves. So one thing here's a little trick that might be useful to you, right? Is when you know, there's this adage in chess, when you find a good move, look for a better one, okay? So even when you think you've considered all the candidate moves, and even when you think you've got a preferred move to play, and here I've got 19 minutes on the clock, right? Plenty of time. Think of a wild card. Just have a play, give yourself a treat. Say, is there anything else, even if it looks stupid? I'm just going to consider, I'm going to practice, I'm going to get into the habit of considering one more move that I haven't yet considered on every turn, right? And you never know, you may come up with something absolutely outstanding. Doesn't like that move. Says I should have taken the pawn. Ah, yes. See, it's another tactic. Look at this, right? Bishop takes pawn. This is what we call an overworked defender. It's defending two pieces at once. So basically, that was a free pawn. If I take that pawn, pawn takes, I get the knight. Happy days. Again, just leaving stuff on the table. Trade off bishops. Okay, so here I'm simplifying to a point where, you know, I'm a pawn up. I could have been 3 pawns up at this point, right? That's the difference. You know, this game could have ended up in a draw. I could have completely fouled up the endgame and ended up losing. I could have been 3 pawns up at this point. Okay, it wanted me to put my knight in here. Okay, only slight difference. Good moves, good moves, good moves, good. Everybody happy, doesn't like that. Okay, so here it says I should have taken with the A pawn. That's interesting. I guess, you know, if I had done, my rearmost pawn would have been here. A lot easier for my king then to defend these 2 pawns than these 2 pawns. So that kind of makes sense. Okay. Right, it says instead of moving your knight, that black should have counterattacked me, which we do get in the end. That's the best move, good. Oh, it doesn't like that. Rook e6. Ah. Rook e6, trade off rooks. And then actually, if we traded rooks, my king to here would have won the knight. The knight has no squares. Interesting. Never thought of that. Didn't consider it. Again, same old thing. Just not looking down enough paths. Interesting. Trade. There. Good, it likes that move. Likes that. Good, king to there. I have played accurately in this game. King to there it likes. Okay, doesn't like me pushing my pawn. Says, don't push your pawn. Harass the rook. Grab this, get the king towards the center of the board. Now I do that, it likes that. It's happy about that. Moving the king back is also the best move. King there, best move, good. Attack the king, drop back, yeah. Doesn't like that move. F3. F3? What the huh? What the hey? It wants F3. And it says rook wouldn't have grabbed it. Okay, I guess, well, the rook's defending this guy. This guy's kind of more important. Yeah? So this is like a decoy. So playing F3 here, right? If rook takes, king takes this pawn, and that would have been a mistake. And then the king's going to grab this pawn. And then we've got 2 pawns ready to promote. Yep. Good old computer. All right, let's go back. Doesn't like that move. Takes is best. King there. Rook across is best. Rook b6 is best, and it's got me nearly 5 points up now, and that's where we get the resignation. So, brilliant stuff. You know, I've learned more from the analysis of the game than I did from the win. Good to learn, yeah? And I know that I need to just be looking down more paths, considering more possibilities, thinking more creatively. Even when I think I've got an attack, and especially even when I think I've got the upper hand in a game, why not keep pressing forward and actually get a winning position rather than just a good position? Good to learn. I've learned from it. Hope you've learned from it as well. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your support. And I'll see you soon.